Hello, and welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. I'm Chris Crawford, and I am joined today by Drew Silva. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some very early draft regrets and also some potential betting plays for the Rookie of the Year. But first, let's go over some headlines from the early part of the weekend. Unfortunately, we got to start with some bummer news. Micheal Harris placed on the injured list with what's being described as back stiffness, also as a back strain. It's been said if both. Looked like he picked it up while attempting kind of an awkward stolen base. They're kind of saying, Drew, that this is going to be a minimum stint, but this is kind of a bummer, right? And I think you got to look at some early replacements as well. Do you have some guys who you're kind of looking at here for Micheal Harris? And, is this something that you're going to be concerned about for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think he initially suffered that injury when he banged into the outfield wall on Wednesday and then aggravated it on that slide.
Mm,
I guess that was Thursday, or was that in the same game? Either way, they're saying he probably would have been back within 4 or 5 days, but they
right.
couldn't really afford to play a man short at this point of the year. So might as well give him the full 10 days. Let him get it rested. He was so durable last year. I'm not worried about this being like a lingering thing. The internal options there for Atlanta, Sam Hilliard, I've always had sort of a love affair with Sam Hilliard from his days in the Rocky system. Just go
You
look at what
sure
he did
have.
with their AAA affiliate in Albuquerque. And I'm just a square who looks at AAA stats and assumes they're gonna translate right over into Major League production. And I know Albuquerque plays at altitude, right?
Yep.
It's a very hitter friendly park if I'm not mistaken.
All of them are.
And he's yeah, and I think especially there, and Hilliard's never he's flashed sometimes at the
Hmm.
major league level. He flashed sometimes during various points with the Rockies, but I don't know that he's going to be the answer, especially if this is only going to be a little short period for him to get some starts in center field. They also have Kevin Pillar. They called up Eli White, who's a very good defender, not much of a hitter, but can cover all three outfield spots. He was actually off to a pretty good start at AAA, but I don't think really the internal options there for Atlanta are where you want to look. Miles Straw is out there. Already a ton of steals. He's got to be the major league leader, right? I think he has up to 5 now, playing every day in center field for the Guardians. Brian Anderson is a top 5 player at the moment. I think he's number 2, depending on what your scoring categories are. But he's been picked up a lot. Good situation for Anderson to thrive there in Milwaukee. Luis Urias is hurt. Tyrone Taylor with another setback recently. So it looks like Anderson is going to be an everyday player for the Brewers for the foreseeable future. And they've gotten off to a really hot start. Adam Frazier is off to a great start with Baltimore, outfield eligible and at second base. That's not going to fully last, but he's had some nice runs with batting average. He's also had some bad runs as well, just a very kind of streaky hitter. Michael Conforto is still around 50% rostered, which I was
Mm.
surprised by. You got to love the power he's shown so far with the Giants. So if you're playing in a shallower league, he looks good coming off that entire missed 2022 season because of shoulder surgery. I don't know. It did feel like the outfield was shallower than it's been this draft season. Ryan Boyer mentioned that to me on one of the first podcasts we did together, and that was before I'd even done a draft. And he's like, outfield's pretty shallow, and I was like, really? Like it's never been shallow. But if you're drafting in like a 5 team league, those options got very scarce pretty quickly. Like you couldn't just wait to fill out your final 2 spots in that 5 team outfield or 5 outfielder team grid. You couldn't just wait. So I don't know. Miles Straw, if you want speed, I think Brian Anderson, he's going to be an everyday player, and he's definitely been a productive fantasy performer in the past with the Marlins, and he looks really healthy. And he's going to be eligible at multiple positions, third base and the outfield. I would go with one of those two. And hey, if Conforto's there, certainly grab him.
I think Conforto's a great call. I was surprised when you told me how little he's rostered in leagues, just because he does have the pedigree. I get coming off the injury and not exactly a huge stolen base threat, but that's a nice little pickup. I would say too, on top of Brian Anderson, Garrett Mitchell and Joey Weimer would both be guys that I'd be looking to target as well. I've been really impressed with what Mitchell has done. He hasn't stolen a base yet, which is a little surprising because That dude can fly, but I think they will be coming, and Weimer offers some power speed combination. But yeah, all those guys. But fortunately, it does sound like this will be a short-term injury for Harris, because this is a player that a lot of you drafted in the second round or the top of the third, a top 30 option. Here's hoping that you get that type of production for the rest of the season after he comes back in hopefully a week or so. Marcus Stroman, Drew, has been one of the best pitchers in baseball, and that's how I know it is April 8th. That now, all due respect to Marcus Stroman, but I have been impressed with what I've seen from him. 6 more shutout innings on Friday against a pretty solid Ranger lineup, gave up just the 2 hits, walked 3, struck out 8. So over his 2 starts to begin the year against Milwaukee and Texas, 12 innings, 5 hits, 14 strikeouts against 6 walks. Are you buying into Marcus Stroman? Obviously, I'm not asking you, will Marcus Stroman have a 0.00 ERA on the 2023 season? But you have to be at least a little impressed with this, Drew. And are you buying in on him being an option for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I mean he's always pretty much been a fantasy relevant pitcher because the ERAs have always been really good, and I
Mhm.
would expect that to continue. I mean he's always limited runs, at least like in the last 4 or 5 years. That's been his bag. Um, I don't think the strikeout rate is going to be what it is right now. What he's got 14 so far in his 12 scoreless innings, 14 strikeouts. He's issued 6 walks. I He's never been like a K per nine guy above 9. It's I think what his career K per nine is 7.5, and I
Mm.
would expect it to settle closer to 8 than 11, where he's hinting at right now. But yeah, I mean, I think he's a very good pitcher who's always been, a solid number 4 type of fantasy starter. I was surprised when the Cubs gave him the contract that he did because it didn't seem like they were going to be competitive right away. And
Right.
I'm still not really sold that they're going to be competitive this year, even though they did open up the pocketbooks over the winter. But it's looking like a perfect fit. I think he really wanted to play in Chicago and live in Chicago. I mean, the north side of Chicago is one of the coolest areas in the country,
Oh, yeah.
especially during the summer. Actually, only during the summer, maybe. But I no, I mean, yeah, I think he's going to have a nice year ERA wise. I wouldn't expect this uptick in strikeouts to continue. It's very early to be like making conclusions on what a guy is doing, but he looks sharp out of the gate.
Yeah, you can't complain about the start. I mean, just looking at some of these numbers on Baseball Savant, and remember, Savant, it's not predictive, it just gives you, but he's earned the results. Like his whiff percentage is in the 76th percentile, strikeout percentage in the 77th. Always concerned about the fact that because he is diminutive, which is the nice way I think to put that, he does not generate a lot of extension. So, if you pick up the baseball on him, you can hit the baseball an awful long way. And I don't expect him to be somebody who puts up strikeout totals the way that he has. But I will admit, I have watched both of the starts and I have come away impressed. He's always been a kind of a risky guy for me in fantasy just because there's such a chance of a blowout start because he doesn't miss bats and he doesn't generate the extension or a ton of velocity or not a great combination for fantasy dominance, but certainly impressed with what he's done so far.
Yeah, and the Cubs can play defense. Like, I don't think Dansby Swanson is gonna be the hitter they expect him to be given the salary, but he's a great defensive player. And
Yeah.
their entire infield and they've got some good gloves in the outfield. Seiya Suzuki is on his way back. He started a rehab assignment. He's starting a rehab assignment today, I believe, on
Yep.
Saturday. So he could be back by the end of next week, and that's a big boost too. Getting him back.
Absolutely. Somebody who has missed bats at a little higher rate over his career is, and by a little, I mean mostly a lot. Sonny Gray was dominant on Friday. 7 innings, 4 hits, 1 earned run, 1 base on ball, 13 strikeouts against the Houston lineup. Over his first 12 innings of the year, he has given up just that 1 run, 14 strikeouts, 5 walks. Drew, I think Sonny Gray was somebody that has tantalized us for a long time as a fantasy option. Could this finally be like the breakout year? And by finally, I mean a breakout year after a few years of borderline mediocrity, and wondering if this guy was kind of done too.
I know, man. if you've been playing fantasy baseball for the last decade or writing about fantasy baseball for the last decade, you've had to like change your opinion on Sonny Gray so many times.
It's for
And I don't
sure.
know where I am with I don't know where I am with it right now. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, he's when healthy over the last couple of years, he's been really effective with the strikeouts and with the ERA. And man, that entire Twins rotation right now, we was it you that we were talking about like world? We were talking. I don't
Yeah.
know what was the topic. Oh, win totals, and you really
Win
like the
totals.
Twins over,
Yeah.
and I think it was like 82 and a half or something, 83 and a half maybe.
Yeah.
It might have even been lower than that. And you pointed to their rotation, and I was like, eh. But I think the point you made was that it's a lot of like potential number two and number three guys, and they don't really have a
Yes.
weakness there. And
Hmm.
you look at what they've done out of the gate so far this season. Again, it's really early, but Pablo Lopez a 0.73 ERA through two starts. Sonny Gray a 0.75 ERA through two starts. Joe Ryan had a good debut. Kenta Maeda came out of his start with a little fatigue, but he was dominant before
Yeah.
he left. I think he had what, 9 strikeouts over 5 innings, only 1 run allowed. Tyler Mahle looked awesome. 7 strikeouts, 1 walk over 5 1-run innings. So yeah, I mean the Twins look like they have a really good pitching staff right now, and Sonny Gray is part of that. If he's healthy, yeah, I think he's like a good number five type fantasy starter. And you could say that for every name that I just listed off there, with like Maeda and Malley and Lopez probably like having a ceiling of maybe being a number two type fantasy starter. Maybe Malley more number three, but I mean Maeda won the AL Cy Young award during the COVID year. So he's proven that he can be like a top flight fantasy arm. I'm dancing around the question because I don't know what to think about Sonny Gray,
It,
honestly. Like,
it's a
I don't
tough
know.
one. It's a tough one because look, we have been burnt before, haven't we? And it's worth pointing out that he is a much different pitcher than he was in those couple of years, I guess it was, with the Yankees, where he just looked like a lost cause. And then he had a couple of really fantasy relevant seasons with the Reds. But injury stuff, I think you always have to be cognizant of it. Sonny Gray, not exactly the biggest pitcher in the world either. So some questions about durability. But I would say this, I'd be hopping on the bandwagon just because I've been so impressed with the stuff that he's shown in these first two starts. And I do think that the Twins provide a pretty good chance for wins. Drew, we have written a lot about this guy, mostly about rumors, to be honest with you, Brian Reynolds, because the contract situation that's going on there, the rumor that there's just a couple of clauses that have kept it from getting done. Who the heck knows? What I do know is that Brian Reynolds has been really flipping good to begin the 2023 season. Hit his fifth home run of the season, has a 1.572 OPS right now, has driven in 13 runs, which leads baseball in hits, RBIs, slugging, and total bases. I don't even know what to even ask you about this, Drew, other than just to say, like, are we ever going to stop underrating Brian Reynolds as a fantasy option?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I it can be like in the back of your mind when you draft Brian Reynolds, you're like, oh, did I just draft a Pittsburgh Pirate? But people don't feel that way about O'Neal Cruz, because you can dream on him being like a 40-40 guy at some point. I don't know if he
Sure.
ever gets there, but like that's the kind of potential that he brings. And Brian Reynolds is just super solid, and he's like pretty much always been that. There have been a little bit of peaks and valleys to
Hmm.
his like overall back of the baseball card numbers, but he's just a super solid hitter with a great plate approach. And I guess we got to talk about it. This baseball is bouncing.
Oh yeah.
And I hate doing this every year. I'm so tired of talking about, analyzing the baseball and trying to factor that into fantasy projections. But the thing is flying. And like it's very noticeable in bigger ballparks that players are having an easy time hitting 450-foot bombs. And Reynolds is
Sure.
a guy that can benefit from that because he's a really good line drive hitter. He's a good doubles hitter, and those balls are going to go over the fence if there's a little more juice in the baseball. And the whole contract situation is weird. If it's being reported that it was like 7 years and just over 100 million, I can't believe that he and his agent would even consider that. Like,
Correct.
have you seen what the baseball landscape is giving to productive hitters? Like, it's kind of changed for pitchers. Like, you're not getting like top dollar Garrett Cole money, it seems like, for pitchers anymore. But you look at like the Manny Machado extension that he just got. There's a ton of recent examples. Like the pocketbooks are open for productive hitters, and so I don't blame him. I can't believe the Pirates didn't just say, okay, yeah, you can have whatever clauses you want if you're going to accept 7 years, 100 million. Maybe it's not. Maybe that figure is not correct. Like, because
I
I feel like that information is probably coming from like a Pirates source. Maybe like
oh
it,
yeah,
it doesn't seem like it. I don't think that Reynolds and his agent have been like very vocal about it, other than to say that we either want this done or we're going to free agency. But I guess it's still going on, and the fact that the conversations are still happening, I guess, gives you optimism as a Pirates fan that they're not going to let another star get away. But if it doesn't get done by the trade deadline, which is going to be August 1st, I believe they just kind of set that. I think he's going to move to a different team. I think I mean, they might as well trade him at peak value. And if he's, the MLB home run leader rolling into July, like,
sure.
there's going to be a lot of teams that want that guy. And maybe it would be smart long term for the Pirates to do that, even though they're just in this perpetual rebuild and it's just going to kind of start again. I mean, they still have some control over him. But that would be great for his fantasy value, right? To get into a better
Yes,
lineup. And he's like an ideal, like, number two type hitter, depending on where he goes. And to plug him in, like, the Dodgers could kind of use an outfielder. Like, how nice would that look with him sitting there at the top of the lineup, or even like if he slides into like the Max Muncy number three type role. You could just see him going to a team, bringing that great plate approach and just eating up RBIs and runs scored. So I think I'm surprised that he's shown so much power out of the gate, but I'm also not, because it seems like we're dealing with a different baseball yet again.
yeah, and a guy who makes hard contact. I'm still more a
Hmm.
believer in Brian Reynolds in the average category, even though he only hit 262 last year. That hit tool is just so good. It's been something I believed in since Vanderbilt. Before we get into the second part of the show, I think we got an interesting question here on the chat, and I'm going to answer it just because they complimented my shirt. The Hart Foundation asks, I need a backup third baseman for Bobby Witt Jr. in a mixed league, 12-team league. Patrick Wisdom and Isak Paredes are available. Who would you suggest I pick up? Drew, which of those two would you be picking up?
I don't. I want to see more options.
That's fair. Let's just
um,
say those are the only two options available for the sake of this beautiful chat.
I would go Paredes then, I guess. I mean, hey, Wisdom's got raw power, and I just talked about how the baseball is going to reward,
Sure.
guys like that. He's just not actually a very good player, you know. I mean, like but he runs into baseballs, and he's got an everyday job for the time being. Like the Christopher Morel was sent down before camp broke. Um, I don't really see him maintaining like an everyday type status. If the Cubs are actually going to challenge for the NL Central, I don't
Sure.
think Wisdom's going to be an everyday player for them. But hey, it's like it's kind of what they have right now. Um, I don't know. Neither of them are very exciting. I feel like in a mixed 12 team league, you could do better at third base. I want to see the Hart Foundation send us other options, and we'll like send us like five other options, and we'll pick a better one maybe.
Sounds good. I will say this. I do like Paradise. My only issue is he's going to have to play really well because there are some options in Tampa Bay in their farm system
Yep.
that, like Curtis Mead and Vidal Brujan, if he gets off to a hot start, like that could really limit his playing time. But he's off to a really nice start, and we have seen that when Paradis is hot, like especially last year, he was like for a second there, he looked like a real thing, and is a former top prospect. It's worth pointing out, a guy that the Cubs really liked. Traded to Detroit, didn't really work out in Detroit, but Tampa Bay is pretty good at this, and they appear to be tapping into those things. So if those are your two options, those are the two that I would personally go with. We're going to take a look at some early draft regrets and also look at the rookie of the year odds, because I think there are some interesting plays both in the NL and the AL. But first, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Baseball is back, Swing into the MLB season with vivid seats and score tickets to all of the hottest matchups and biggest games of the year. Every crack of the bat, every deep center fly, and every heart-pounding double play of your favorite team live and in person. Plus, with Vivid Seats rewards, now you earn rewards with every single purchase. Each ticket you buy gets you closer to your reward. Just buy 10 tickets, then simply cash in your credit reward in your 11th ticket purchase. It's that easy. Here's a pro tip reward. Buy tickets for your whole group, split the bill, and make progress towards your free 11th ticket even faster. From behind the plate to the upper deck, Vivid Seats has great tickets for all the 2023 games that matter to you. Just visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Vivid Seats, experience it live. See vividseats.com/rewards for terms and conditions. All right, Drew, we're reactionary folks. Let's take a look at some guys that we're having regrets about. And look, it is April 8th. Even we can admit that there's an awful lot of baseball left. But we're really going to be focusing on some guys who have gotten off to impressive starts that maybe we shouldn't have slept on. And Drew, why don't you start with a guy who is very near and dear to my heart?
Yeah, well, just at the top, I'd say I was trying to think of some guys that like I wish that I didn't draft, but I feel like it's even way, way too early to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Maybe a couple weeks from now, that'll be the topic. Like,
there we go.
But yeah, I'm going to start it off with Luis Castillo, and we talked about some AL Cy Young Award odds before the season started, and I think you mentioned Castillo as a nice play. You're also on the Twins. Look at you, you're not so bad.
I
And
guess.
Castillo wasn't necessarily like a long shot, but he was at
No.
plus 1600, plus 1700 behind Garrett Cole, Jacob deGrom, Dylan Cease, Carlos Rodon, who's still injured right now, Alek Manoah, Shohei Ohtani, and Shane McClanahan. So 8th on the board at most betting sites, and everything we've seen so far in the early going has me thinking he should be among the favorites. And a top 10 fantasy starter. Just seems super comfortable in Seattle. Declined an invitation to pitch in the World Baseball Classic so that he could stay in Mariners camp. He got the opening day nod in what will be his first full season on the Mariners out of a number of good options that they could have gone with. The 5-year, $108 million extension last September, which could prove to be a huge bargain.
Yeah.
11 2/3 scoreless innings to begin his 2023 season against the Guardians and the Angels. Pretty good lineups. Just 3 hits allowed, 2 walks, 12 strikeouts. Castillo was the 16th starting pitcher to go in the average draft this spring. So obviously wasn't any kind of sleeper. And
Sure.
in a snake draft or auction too, you'd have to reach to get him before his typical draft slot or dollar amount. But looking back, I wish that I did reach. And it's easy to say right now, but looking at the ADP chart on RotoWire and the pitchers in his range, I'd want Castillo over Max Scherzer. Maybe that's a little reactionary, but I'm going to stick with it. Zach
I get it.
Wheeler, I'd take him over Zach Wheeler. I'd take him over Alek Manoah, and I would obviously take him over Justin Verlander, but that obviously gets clouded because he went down with an injury before the season. But you can go pretty high up the list like this, and I think he gets into that top 10 if we're redoing drafts and we're only 10 days into the season. And he goes at Wrigley Field against the Cubs next week, then hosting the Rockies after that, a 2-start week, actually, if the Mariners stay on their current projected rotation schedule. As my number 2 starter, or even waiting a bit and making him my ace, that would have set you up pretty well. Big fan of Luis Castillo. I was going into draft season, and it's not like there were other pitchers in that range that I liked more. It's just almost like I don't know. Could he be like a 220 strikeout guy? That's the kind of the range that you need him to be. And I feel like he can be. I feel like he's going to bring everything that you need from a fantasy ace: the wins, the ERA, the WHIP, the strikeouts, and the workload. I think he's just going to be a workhorse ace all season for the Mariners.
Yep, I totally agree. And I will say this. So Ryan and I, when we did the preview category, mentioned Luis Castillo as a potential bust in the whip, and it's the closest I've ever come to quitting. But I will say this. I got it because there have been issues with him throwing strikes before. His command since joining the Mariners just looks so different. And you have to give the Mariners credit, which is a weird thing for me to do. I literally have a radio show that basically yells at the team every single week. But their pitching development is really good. And I just watch Castillo pitch, and like, he looks like the command of an ace now. And he's always had the good stuff. He's always had that impressive change, which, by the way, he started throwing again in the start against Cleveland, which was awesome to see. Some 70 grade pitches there, but he's mostly fastball slider now. And the Mariners are as good. They are like what the Mets were for developing sliders were a couple of years ago. These guys now, when the Mariners get a chance to get these guys these sliders, it's really impressive. I could not be more in on Luis Castillo as a Cy Young candidate. Drew, thank you for saying nice things about my sweet, sweet Luis Castillo. I want to talk about a guy who, man, it frustrates me that I did not draft this guy higher, because he's a 22-year-old who's had success in the Major League Baseball, and he's off to a great start in 2023. Wander Franco, and I'm just going to read you, Drew, some baseball savant stuff here. And again, not predictive, but does represent just how flipping good this guy has been. 97th percentile in expected weighted on base average, 97th in expected batting average, 98th in expected slugging, 92nd in barrel percentage, 94th in Ks, 96th in whiff percentage, 89th in chase rate, hard hit percentage, all well above average. Like, Drew, this is one of the most talented baseball players that I've ever seen in my entire life. And he ended up being drafted as the right around the ninth shortstop. Him and Willie Adames and Tim Anderson kind of rotated through stuff. And I get what the concern was from the fantasy community, that he just doesn't run as much as some of these other guys. He just doesn't. But neither does Carlos Correa. And all due respect to Carlos Correa, Wander Franco is a better offensive player than Carlos Correa. I'm just saying that right now.
Wow.
Hot take. I believe that Wander Franco is a better offensive player right now than that guy. He's a better offensive player than a bunch of these guys. Look, I am a prospect guy. Unfortunately, I can get sucked into this stuff, and sometimes it works, and a lot of time it doesn't. But this is a 22-year-old Drew who struggled to a 745 OPS last year. Is that really struggling as a 22-year-old? And like, I get that maybe you're not comfortable betting on like for him in the next year based on what he did in that season, which was obviously injury prone as well. Wander Franco, the sky is the limit, man. And he really, to me, should have been closer to a top 60 pick than a guy who was drafted oftentimes right around the 90-100 range. It's just, I'm all in, man. I am all in on Wander Franco being a big, big thing in 2023 and beyond.
Yeah, it's funny that this is the lowest I think that he's been drafted over the last 3 draft seasons, going back to when
Yeah.
we kind of all did redrafts before the COVID year. And I mean, I don't have any shares of him either. I feel stupid,
Yeah.
but it's easy to get sucked into the idea of like the counting stats just aren't there. Um, and not taking into account that the talent is going to deliver the counting stats eventually, and taking into account the age. The dude is like, he was just like ready for a breakout, and you knew it was going to happen at some point. Maybe it doesn't even happen this year, but I think all the hints so far are that this could be the year that he truly arrives. And what, the Rays are 7-0. They're
Yeah.
like setting records. Have they. I know if they had won Saturday, or if they had won Friday's games by more than 4 runs, it was like the first team to ever win their first 7 games by 4 runs or more, like in the history of baseball.
Shout out to
When
Sarah
I was
Langs for
putting
that
together
number.
that, yeah, of course, it always goes back to Sarah Langs.
Yeah.
Um, and when I was putting together like that win totals column, or like just thinking about win totals, it's always so tempting to go with the under on the Rays, because you sort of look at the depth chart and you're like, how is this going to be a 92 win team? Like, I think their number was around 90.5. It's like,
Right.
is this team really that good? But they come through, and if Wander Franco can be like a home run, doubles, extra base hits, 900, even high 800 OPS guy for them this year, and he's going to deliver for you in batting average, like, they could be a really good offense. And they clearly have the pitching, and that pitching is only going to get better probably as they move through the year. So yeah, I mean, you want to trust the talent. Fantasy scoring doesn't always reward true talent. Like there
Sure.
are guys that kind of slip through the cracks, but generally it does. And that like if he makes the next leap, and he certainly seems capable of doing that in terms of like batting average and OPS,
Mhm.
that all of those other numbers are going to be there, in a fairly productive Rays lineup that can turn it over. Um, my second guy is Masataka Yoshida,
Mhm.
and I wasn't sure how the numbers would translate. It's always a tricky thing with players from Japan and Korea, tricky with both hitters and pitchers to project how they're going to perform in their first year of Major League Baseball. But he homered in his fourth big league game this past Monday. He stole a base in his third game, and then again another steal on this past Thursday. Yoshida's hitting a lot of ground balls out of the gate,
Yes.
but at least he's making contact. And it can be dangerous, I think, to look at ground ball, fly ball rate this early in the season and try to draw conclusions from any of it. The same can be said for all sorts of metrics and counting
Mhm.
stats and rate stats. I'm encouraged by the fact that he's only has 2 strikeouts through 32 plate appearances. There are the ground balls, but it doesn't seem like he's getting fooled. He was not a productive base stealer in Japan, like at all. It wasn't really part of his game. So I don't know how to project that moving forward. I wouldn't totally bank on him being like a 20 plus stolen base guy, but the pace sure looks good right now with 2 steals through 7 games. I think he's going to be a serious contributor in batting average and on base percentage with like 20 homer, 25 homer pop. In his final year in Japan, a 336 average, a 1.007 OPS, 1,007 OPS. That seems weird to say. 21 dingers, 28 doubles. Passed the eye test in the World Baseball Classic. I love the plate approach. I guess I thought there might be more of a learning curve for Yoshida, and there could be eventually. But from what I've seen so far, I don't necessarily think that's a guarantee that there will be this big learning curve. He's hit cleanup in each one of his starts so far too, so the Red Sox clearly feel confident that he's ready to handle a large role in their offensive attack. Not that they have the best middle of the order options after Rafael Devers. That team is just so weirdly constructed right now. But an everyday player with these kind of contact skills in this current 2023 offensive environment, the new rules and possibly a new baseball that encourages contact, I feel like Yoshida's set up for a lot of success. And I wish I had more shares or any shares. I don't have any. 160-ish ADP this spring in drafts. His draft position was all over the board because he's just a hard guy to project. But I think a really good value if you got him like in the mid to later rounds, which a lot of people did.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great call. Part of this being just like I would have drafted Yoshida, and I'm a guy who usually drafts early because I'm an idiot. But if I knew that Yoshida was going to be hitting cleanup, I would have been much more interested in him, I think, because all of the talk was about him hitting at the top of the lineup. And sure, that's going to help you in the runs category, but a much higher chance of contributing in all 5 categories by him being in that cleanup spot. Drew, this guy was drafted, if you look at on our RotoWire ADP, and I definitely recommend everybody go check this out, right around 112th, which was the 7th second baseman off the board. And it's worth pointing out that, like, there was kind of like a big 6 second baseman, and then there was a big drop off. Maybe this guy
Yes.
should have been included in that list based on what we've seen so far. And Glaber Torres has been fantastic to begin the year, hitting 409, 552, 727, 2 homers. And the big thing here, Drew, already 5 stolen bases in 6 attempts. And I think what's worth pointing out about Glaber Torres is just the same thing with Wander Franco a little bit. I think people feel like this is like a 28, 29-year-old. He's still only 26. And a breakout season is more than possible, which is a weird thing to say for a guy who hit 38 home runs just 4 years ago. Worth pointing out that of those 38 home runs, 43 of them were somehow against the Baltimore Orioles in that season.
I
I
was
don't
going to
know how
say
that works out, but it is worth saying, pointing
it
out that
was
that
like
was a
13 of them, though, wasn't it? It was
yeah.
some crazy number.
It was an insane number. Just listening to Dave O'Brien just absolutely lose his mind as he homers again against the Orioles was a lot of fun. But look, he was okay last year. 761 OPS with 24 homers and 10 stolen bases. That's certainly not bad. But I think that there's another thing here with Gleyber Torres and that's motivation, because all of the talk in the offseason was about this guy getting traded, right? All of the talk was that they were going to move Gleyber Torres in order to improve the pitching staff because they had guys like Anthony Volpe and they had guys like Oswaldo Peraza and some other options that they could play in the middle infield. I think motivation is big for here. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why he might be running a little more. Of course, the new rules, all of that stuff, it's going to lead to more added stolen bases. But I see a player who looks like he's very motivated to have a big season, and talk about never been a question of talent. It is never, ever been a question of talent with Gleyber Torres.
I mean, I was down on him because I didn't know if he would be on the Yankees come
Same.
opening day because they kept losing starting pitchers and he was a clear trade candidate because they have prospects and just options on their middle infield.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like he had kind of like the vibes weren't necessarily good around Torres and the Yankees, but I included in that analysis, and you can go back and check the tape because we talked about it on this podcast. Like if he's on the Yankees, he's going to be productive.
Right.
This productive, I didn't foresee that necessarily, but he's always been a pretty aggressive player. It's kind of hurt
Mm-hmm.
him at times.
Absolutely.
He plays the game really fast, but with these new rules and with the bigger bases, you're seeing that aggression turn into production. And I think he's going to keep this going. I agree. It's weird to say like he's a breakout candidate because he's already like broken out multiple times in the past. But I think he's gonna remain on the Yankees. And I think he's going to be have a prominent role in that offense, and he's going to hit homers and steal bases. And I don't think I have him on one roster, but it would have been nice to have more shares of him because he was a value at second base. You're right.
Absolutely.
It's been a frustrating position for a couple of years now,
Yeah.
and especially in drafts this year. I hate reaching for like a position player, but it felt like you had to reach at second base, and I wish that I had reached a little bit or just waited and gotten Torres where his average draft position was.
Mm-hmm.
Chris Bryant is another one for me. And speaking of bad vibes, like they were not especially great around Bryant during like prime draft season, not because he was hurt again, but because 2022 was such a lost year.
Right.
The first year of that probably ill-advised 7-year, $182 million contract with the Rockies. There were multiple injuries last year, but the plantar fasciitis is what had worried me the most going into this spring. I've thankfully never dealt with plantar fasciitis, but I know people that have, and the only way for it to
Yes.
get better is to get off your feet, to rest it. Cortisone can help, but like only temporarily. And if you're a baseball player, you have to be on your feet a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I read all the stories over the winter that Bryant got fitted for insoles and was working with a physical therapist to help him, manage the plantar fasciitis. But then he did acknowledge, like right at the start of camp, that there was still some soreness in his foot. It all just the whole situation scared me away, but he got through camp healthy. He broke camp in good health, and the situation there in Colorado is still tremendous for fantasy production. It lines up so well to amplify the things that he does best as a very well-rounded hitter. And of course,
Mm-hmm.
he has at least one hit in each of his eight games so far, starting the year on an 8-game hitting streak. No homers yet, but 3 doubles, 8 singles, a 344 average, a 400 on base percentage through 35 plate appearances. The homers will come if he stays on this course. And for all
Sure.
the faults that the Rockies have, there should be like RBI and runs scored opportunities as he sits in that number 2, number 3 spot in that lineup. 121 ADP on Yahoo. The risk was built into the draft day cost, and I wish I would have taken the risk at least in one league. Who knows? Like maybe the plantar fasciitis will pop back up again. Maybe there will be other injury issues. There's been a lot of stuff over the last few years, and he's having to cover a big outfielder there in Denver. So you never know with the foot. Just one turn at DH so far, which I think is kind of a concern. That's been Charlie Blackmon's role, and probably will continue to be Charlie Blackmon's role. But when Bryant's healthy, taking half of his bats at Coors Field, you gotta love it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a matter of if he can't stay healthy. It's I think it's worth pointing out that when Bryant was on the field last year, he was pretty darn good. Like 305
Yeah, he was.
average, solid OPS. Power started to come on late. it's worth pointing out the Rockies, the power has not been there for the team to begin the year. Only 6 total home runs for the team, which is weird to see through 8 games. But I absolutely believe in Chris Bryant. More of a rate guy because I think at some point you are going to see an injured list stint for the dude. It's just science at this point. It's proven. I hope I'm wrong because I really like Chris Bryant. Very handsome baseball player and very good baseball player when he's on the field. This guy's pretty good too, Drew. Pablo Lopez. I should have been more on top of this. And look, it's just the 2 starts. And it's worth pointing out that Pablo Lopez got off to a sensational start last year as well. And then, had some other issues and didn't end the year exactly red hot. But he's looked great so far. Against his old team on Wednesday, 7 innings of 1-run baseball, 1 walk, 8 strikeouts. He struck out 8 in both of his starts. It's also worth pointing out it was against the Royals and the Marlins. But his stuff has looked great. The command has been fine. He did walk 3 in that start against Kansas City. I imagine it was just unbelievably cold in Kansas City for that start because, of course, it is. It was March 30th against Miami. In that heat, he had no issues at all. Like, I'm a big believer in Pablo Lopez. It's one of the reasons, again, we talked about it with Sonny Gray at the top of the show. It's one of the reasons why I do think that twin win total is such a strong one because they have options like Lopez in the rotation. And it would not shock me at all if this is a guy who's been good. Maybe this is his very good to great season in 2023.
Yep. We kind of already covered that Twins rotation. Just a lot of like number 2 and number 3 types, and I think Lopez might be the best of the bunch. That was a great get. Like I'm sure every team in baseball was trying to get Pablo Lopez. He was kind of on the trade block perennially before the Twins finally landed him. I was doing a draft for an acquaintance on Thursday night, this past Thursday night. That's my new business venture, Chris, drafting for people, and I get paid in beers. I don't get paid in cash.
There you go.
But it was on Yahoo, a pretty standard league, 6x6 scoring with OBP instead of average and slugging percentage as the additional offensive category. I forget what quality starts as the additional pitching category. And man, Xander Bogaerts was like fairly low in those Yahoo default rankings behind Dansby Swanson and Tommy Edman at shortstop. I talked about Luis Castillo looking comfortable in Seattle. Bogaerts looks incredibly comfortable in San Diego. And actually, I have Sports Center on my little tablet here, and he was just on there being interviewed and with like a beautiful beach scene in the background.
Nice.
And I mean, who wouldn't be comfortable in San Diego, just weather-wise, going from Boston to that area of Southern California? Already has 3 home runs and 8 RBIs through 8 games. I love that Bogaerts has been getting chances at leadoff against left-handers and hitting cleanup against righties. Like, you couldn't ask for a better situation for fantasy purposes. You get the leadoff boost, and then he's in a perfect RBI situation in that lineup. That'll change when Fernando Tatis Jr. comes back from suspension, which is less than 2 weeks from now, 12 days away from that happening. But Bogaerts could settle into that number 2 spot against lefties. Love that. Stay at cleanup against righties. And the guy is just going to rake all year. I feel really confident in saying that. He was never like a huge power threat during his time with the Red Sox. Home run totals like mostly in the 20s or even the teens. I think 33 was his career high. That was in maybe 2018, 2017. But this baseball is bouncing. We'll say it again. And he's an all fields hitter. Like, some of his line drives can get over the wall, as they've already done. He can pull it. He can go oppo. He shows oppo power all the time and just eat up the scoring categories, whatever scoring categories you need as part of that good and set to improve Padres lineup with the return of Tatis in 12 days. I tried to get Tatis in that draft too, since it happened a week into the season. But the default rankings weren't adjusted for that fact yet that this draft was happening when already a week, he's already a week through the rest of his suspension. But I got sniped just before it was my turn at the top of the 3rd round. I should have been more aggressive on that. I should have taken him in the 2nd round. It was dumb, and I feel bad for that guy. But I didn't tell him that I failed him because really the rest of the team is stacked.
Where do you think Cade McClure drafted Fernando Tatis in his draft, Drew?
Oh man.
That situation was so dumb.
Yeah, if people don't know that, Oh man, so he gave up. Kate McClure's the guy that gave up a homer to Tatis in his second rehab game at El
Right.
Paso. He's at El Paso, right?
Yeah.
What that was on Wednesday or Thursday. I'm mixing up
Uh,
my dates. And then McClure like tweets over a highlight on Twitter, like a home run given up to a cheater or something. Like, dude, that's a
yes.
bad look.
Yes. Yeah.
And you know what?
Yeah.
I'm okay with calling Tatis a cheater because he cheated.
He cheated.
But like you look stupid
Yes.
when you're like, yeah, I gave up a
Yeah.
homer to a cheater. Like, come on, buddy, you're better
Well,
than that. Um,
especially if you
yeah,
look at what the pitch was, like if Fernando Rodney would have hit that pitch out, dude. There's a reason why you are bouncing org to org. Look, you're better than most people, but Fernando Tatis is going to get you. He It's so dumb. I get that you're frustrated. You gave up a home run to a guy who is not a AAA baseball player, and you're working on some stuff probably early in the season. But that's such a bad look. By the way, Drew, it may surprise you. He ended up deleting that tweet. Are you surprised by that development that he didn't like that tweet being up and getting dunked on for hours upon hours upon hours?
maybe he was having a few beers after that start and fired one off. We've all been there.
Yes.
Felt
Yeah,
bad about it the next
absolutely.
morning. Actually, yeah. But
Yeah.
I have
Go
zero.
ahead.
I have zero Bogarts shares outside of this team that I drafted for somebody else, and I was
Nice.
like looking back. I'm like, why was he ranked so low? Like, how could we not see that this was the perfect situation
Yeah.
with him in the Padres? And he's not somebody you're going to be able to trade for in any kind of league with such a hot start, unless you want to give up a ton. It's like the ship has sailed. If you don't have him, I feel like you're going to miss out on a really, really special season.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the talent's all there. He's had tons of success at the major league level. I guess the reason why he slips for a lot of people is the fact that he just has never run. He's never going to be a big stolen base guy. So he is more of a four category player, but I love him hitting at the top of the lineup. Even when Tatis comes back and he moves to probably second against left handers and you move him to fifth against righties, it's still a very solid situation. Now you get the chance to drive in Fernando Tatis Jr. too, and that is not a bad thing to have for your baseball team. Just closing us out real quick. Evan Phillips is a draft regret for me because why didn't I draft the closer for the flipping Dodgers? Like
I
this
have him
is
on like every team.
that's awesome. Yeah, this is the thing is that he fell because nobody was really sure who the closer for the Dodgers is going to be. So it is a justifiable regret. Like there is a reason why he didn't get drafted. There was like Brusdar Gratterall could get save opportunities, and they could be Daniel Hudson when he's healthy. He could get some stuff. But he's the closer of the Dodgers, and the Dodgers are really good. So he's going to get a lot of saves while he gets that chance. Yeah, I wish I would have taken the risk there because he could have even been a little relevant, even if not the closer, because a guy who posts a really low ERA does a pretty good job of missing bats. But Drew, I probably should have drafted the closer for the Dodgers is a regret of mine going into these next
You're right,
150
man.
games.
It was hard to predict how that bullpen was going to work out, but
Sure.
he was so good last year.
Yeah.
And like I was I doing the save show with you, or maybe I was doing it with Boyer. And Dave Roberts likes to have a set closer, you know, like
Yeah, he does.
I I know that the Dodgers like are really smart, you know, but I don't even think that Robert sets the lineup. He's like mentioned that at times in the playoffs, like why is the lineup like this? He's like the front office kind of sets the lineup and does the roster moves, but he's the guy that's calling the pitchers in from the bullpen. That's his call. And I mean, he like traditionally since he's been the Dodgers manager, they've pretty much had a set closer. It helps when that's Kenley Jansen, but
Sure.
he likes to have a set guy out there, and that was his comment the other night. Like most of the ninth inning opportunities, we're going to save Phillips for. You love to hear that. I don't know if it's the best way to manage, but that's what we want in fantasy because there are so few of those guys left.
So let's take a look at those rookie of the year odds to close out the show, Drew. And I think they're really interesting, especially in the American League, because they are so close together. There's a couple guys really close together in the National League too. Let me just run down the top five in each league, and these are going by These are Drew. Remind me who is providing these fine odds for us. This
So
is,
actually,
go ahead.
RotoWire will track these. If you're a RotoWire subscriber, you can go to the betting page,
Oh,
and they've got all like the awards odds. So what we have here, I put a little screenshot in our shared doc, is both the DraftKings and the FanDuel odds, and they're
that's
updated.
awesome.
They're up to the minute. So yeah, it's pretty sweet.
Do you
And
see
you
how I
and you
set
can
you
like
up there
see,
to?
yeah, and you,
Yeah.
well, the nice thing is you can compare them, and I think
Yes.
there will be more books on there besides just DraftKings and FanDuel. Like there are some other books that will be added to the, like if you look at other portions of these charts, there's all kinds of different books. So it's really nice to, hey, you should shop around for better odds if you actually are going to play these kind of bets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So let's take a look real quick at the top five for each league. Gunnar Henderson, Masataka Yoshida, and Anthony Volpe are all very close. They're all somewhere between 350 to 450 plus 350 to 450. So 4.5 to 1. It's interesting that Volpe is actually Yoshida is the favorite on DraftKings, and then Henderson and Yoshida are tied. Grayson Rodriguez at fourth. Tristan Cases is fifth. Grayson Rodriguez is 10-1 combined. Tristan Cases is 16-1, also tied with Josh Young. Drew, just taking a look at like some of the deeper plays here. One, I'll ask you two questions for the American League. One, who's your favorite? The guy that you'd be betting on to win if no odds were, if all the odds were even. And two, who's like a long-term play that looks interesting on these lists?
Man, I I think what you're looking for here is like volume. A guy that is
Mhm.
on the opening day roster, um, and has the chance, just has the opportunities to rack up stats. Which I mean, all three of these guys at the top are that Henderson, Yoshida, and Volpe. Man, I think Yoshida, even though like I'm part of it is because I was like doing some analysis on him before we hopped on here because he was one of my draft day regrets not having shares on him. But I think he's going to make a ton of contact, and that's going to lead to some really nice numbers. Henderson is an incredible talent, like the number one prospect in baseball, pretty much everywhere. I guess depending on where you look. But
Sure.
I don't know if he's like totally ready to be a stats superstar right now. I would feel more confident in Yoshida, who's a lot older than Henderson.
Yeah.
What I would have said this with Seiya Suzuki last year, but before he had all those injuries, like he was the rookie of the year front runner after his really good April, and
Yeah.
then he got hurt and it all went away. But Yoshida could be in a similar situation because these guys are just more experienced when they're coming over from Japan. So I would probably go with Yoshida. Who would you go with among the favorites? And then we can talk about some deeper plays.
I think that you're spot on. I still would probably go Henderson just because I think he's going to fill out the stat sheet a little bit more. And I do think
Yeah,
that there are some people that look, it hasn't really been a huge factor, but there are some who may look at it and go, true rookie and Gunnar Henderson compared to Yoshida, who is, it's almost an insult to call him a rookie based on what he's done in
it is.
Japan. And
Yeah,
I do,
it's
yeah.
worth
So I do
remembering.
think,
This is a voted on award. Sorry to cut you off, and
yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
so people
No,
are
that's
bringing
okay.
biases and all sorts of stuff into it. Yeah,
Yeah, and look, there's also the narrative of if Volpe gets off to a great start too, and if he has the full season, if he's close to those guys, maybe he gets it as the shortstop for the New York Yankees. I think some BBWAA guys just can't help themselves. It is worth pointing out Volpe has not looked good so far. 3 for 20 to begin the year, but a lot of baseball left to be played. But if I had to pick one, I'd probably go Henderson just because I believe he's going to be more of a stat sheet stuffer than Yoshida is because of the stolen base stuff. Real quick, I'll just go my long term odds. I love Oscar Colas at 25-1, man, or 22-1, depending on which booking you're going to use. I think he's going to be up there with the stats. I think he's going to get plenty of playing time. He's on the opening day roster. He's shown some early success. Again, it's not quite the same thing with Yoshida, where he's playing in Cuba, not nearly the same thing as but there is the international flair there. I like Colas a lot at 22-1. That is, I think, excellent odds for somebody who's going to be in the lineup a lot.
yeah. I mean, Esteri Ruiz at 35 to
Oh
1.
yeah,
So
that's
a
tempting too.
$20 bet would a $20 bet would pay 700. And we talked about him last weekend. Like, if someone is gonna steal 100 bases this year, and like it might happen the way it's going right now, it'll be someone like him who's on a bad team and just plays every day and runs wild. Like, if I don't know if he's like closing in on some kind of rookie or Ricky Henderson, he's playing for the A's, like that could be a narrative that drives him. When was the last time we had a 100 base stealer? I should know this.
It's been a long time. I don't know it
Yeah,
either, but it has been a
I don't know it
long
either.
time.
But if he's like setting some kind of A's records and stuff, like that's going to draw a lot of attention. Maybe the other numbers are like so bad that people are like, "Oh, that's a fun story," but he's not actually a good baseball player. But he showed some pop like at
Mhm.
AAA at the upper level of the minors. I know he can be a flawed player. You can punch holes in a lot of his stuff, but why not? $20 to win 700 or $5 to win whatever that would be 300. I'm not good at math, but
That's
I, I
okay.
like I like that kind of. Grayson Rodriguez is up there. He's the fourth one. I I worry. We didn't talk about his debut. I'm sure some other
Yep.
podcasts did on our little RotoWire network. I didn't love the command.
No,
I mean,
no. It
the stuff is awesome. It was my first time like seeing him other than like YouTube highlights.
yeah.
Um, I thought he looked very wild to me, and it could have been like some jitters, but I know that's still kind of a thing that he needs to iron out a little bit.
Sure. And I think there was jitters. I think he was rushing a little bit, especially early on. I think he settled down pretty nicely, and you saw how electric that stuff can be as well. But I would not be betting. I don't think I'd bet on a pitcher for rookie of the year
No, I
until
agree.
like late in the season. There's just so
Like,
much stuff
yeah,
that can
even
happen.
Spencer Strider, like
Yeah.
he what he did in such a limited sample, that's very hard to do.
Yeah.
Like no pitchers in his history have done what he did from a strikeout standpoint in such little time. It's very hard for a pitcher to have the volume to claim this kind of award.
So let's close by looking at the NL Rookie of the Year odds. And no surprise, the top two, Corbin Carroll and Jordan Walker.
Jordan Walker,
Corbin,
see it
yeah.
logging off.
Corbin Carroll is at, with you, right around 360, plus 360. Jordan Walker at plus 410. But there are some other guys here. Kodai Senga at plus 750, James Outman plus 950, Garrett Mitchell 15 to 1, Francisco Alvarez 20 to 1, Miguel Vargas 20 to 1, Hayden Wesneski 20 to 1. Who wins it, Drew? And then somewhat quickly, who do you think is an interesting long-term odd here?
I just said like a pitcher can't win it, but I feel like Senga could have the volume to do it. But I think he's going to have to contend with some really good hitters here.
Mhm.
Um, being Carroll and Walker. Walker has a hit in every one of his games that he's played in the major league so far, and
Yeah,
I don't even think we've really seen him get comfortable yet.
it's crazy.
He already has a homer. He's hit some balls really hard, but I think he's prepared to do a whole lot more. I would put him as the favorite. I love Corbin Carroll's game.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's kind of odd that he's been hitting fifth or sixth so far in the Diamondbacks lineup.
Yeah.
Like Kyle Lewis led off on opening day. Josh Rojas has been doing it in sort of a platoon situation. I wish Rojas was playing every day. I like him in fantasy, but because of the leadoff spot, but he sits too often.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Carroll could really get it going from like as like a five category guy. I'm speaking in fantasy terms. I know that doesn't really apply, but he like you said with Gunnar Henderson, like he can fill up box scores probably more than Jordan Walker can with a little more dynamic talent. But
Mhm.
Walker's already stolen some bases. Like he could do that too. I'm gonna say Walker if we're
Yeah.
talking favorites.
Yeah, I think Walker too. Like, look, I certainly, if we're just talking fantasy stuff, I like Carroll more because he's going to steal a bunch of bases. He's already shown off the elite speed. But if we're just talking rookie of the year odds, I just think Jordan Walker is going to be that guy. The narrative matters in this stuff. And I think Jordan Walker, being a St. Louis Cardinal coming up, going to get a lot of attention and deservedly so. I will say for the long term on here, Spencer Steer at 25-1 is really interesting to me. Gotten off to a nice start, going to be probably playing every day. Obviously, I wouldn't like him if he wasn't playing every day. I think that's an interesting one. Ezekiel Tovar at 32-1 is really interesting. And
Yeah,
another
that is.
Cardinal here too, Alec Burleson at 50-1. Can I guarantee he's going to get a ton of playing time with the Cardinals? I cannot,
Yeah.
but he is playing now. And if he earns that spot at 50-1, being the rookie, I can think of a worse way to spend $10.
Yeah, he's been batting second, which is really cool. Like super talented hitter. Um, we've talked about him before a little bit on this podcast, but like he hits righties and lefties. Like you look at his righty lefty splits in the minors, like, oh, this guy can just hit.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what the situation is, and the Cardinals clearly believe that. The problem is like the only reason he's playing is because Lars Nootbaar's on the IL, and Nootbaar could come back as early as Monday, and it sounds like he
right.
actually will. And for the series opener at Coors Field, the Cardinals have too many outfielders and like no starting pitchers. I don't know what the game plan was. So I think one of them is going to get traded, but it's a weird time of year to like be trading.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know when that's going to happen. I feel like Dylan Carlson is the best bet to move, unless like they're really mad at Tyler O'Neill for some reason. I don't want to talk about that situation. Don't get me started. Um, but yeah, I don't think Burleson's going to play enough. I say that, but they seem to have so much confidence in him to be batting him second whenever he plays.
Yep.
But I don't know.
Yep.
Maybe like if someone gets hurt again, he could get the playing time. But I don't see him putting up better numbers than Jordan Walker. Is kind of the point.
Yeah.
Long shots like Bryce Terang is kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like the Brewers really like him. Brett Beatty, if he was up,
Yeah.
um, Ellie De La Cruz is on there. When is he
Yes.
coming up? It'll be
Yeah.
late this year, right?
I think
If
it'll
it's
be
this
later.
year,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I hope
I
he
think we're
gets a
talking
chance to play, but
2024.
absolutely, yeah. And like everybody else beyond this thing, I did see Matt Mervis at 80-1 and kind of took a kind of close look just because like he was so impressive during the 2022 season, impressed in the AFL. And look, Eric Hosmer, if they really feel like Matt Mervis is ready to go, is Eric Hosmer really going to hold that guy down? And I will say
Hey,
this, like,
yeah.
go ahead.
Go ahead. We never
Uh,
answered the Hart Foundation's third base question.
oh yeah, let's close with that because they give us some options
Yeah,
here? I
so
think they did.
this was the first. Yeah, I feel bad.
That's okay.
So this was the first question. I need a backup third baseman for Bobby Witt Jr. in a mixed 12-team league. Wisdom and Paredes are available. Who would you suggest? And then we asked for some more options, and he gave us Jason Vossler, J.D. Davis, Matt Verling, Heimer Candelario. Okay, so it's a competitive league. I would go
Yeah,
Paredes. Um, and then he says I was shooting for Beatty, but someone snagged him already. Yeah, go with
yeah.
Paredes. He's in a good spot. I don't know if like he's going to put up a ton of stats, but if we're talking about a backup third baseman, it's it's fine. You're doing all
Drew,
right.
you are the people, and it is honorable that you came back to answer that question. And we really do appreciate everybody who drops those in and checks out the show live. That's going to do it for us. You can follow me on Twitter at Crawford_MILB, and you can follow Drew at Drew Silva. Please make sure and hit like and subscribe. And remember, we've got a new episode coming out every single day during the 2023 season. Drew and Ryan will be doing a show tomorrow. I'm sure they'll be looking at some FAAB stuff and probably talking a lot of mess about me at the same time. So, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.